I want to turn to the broader U.S. economy, because from executives that I speak with across the board, what they're most concerned about is the uncertainty. Do you see growth in the near future for the U.S. economy? Do you fear of a lost decade? Or do you think we could see a further decline?
Well, I think the short answer is probably yes to all of those, but not in the exaggerated position. I think we have seen in stocks a lost decade. The last decade was not great. If you look at the S&P performance, it was about flat with a couple of exceptions. And so we have to find a way as a nation and as a set of companies to grow beyond that, number one, which means addressing the global market. Number two, in terms of the U.S., I see slow, measured growth. I don't see a barn burner, and I don't see a double dipper in front of us. And I think your earlier comment is exactly right. It's something I've been giving speeches on now for 2 years, which is take the uncertainty out. Businesses can't invest until they have fewer variables. And right now, there's just too many variables. I don't know what my healthcare costs are going to be, energy costs, corporate taxes, R&D tax credits, and 10 other things. If I at least know what the decisions are, I can make my decisions. But in the area of uncertainty, you can't. It's just one more set of variables. Companies like Intel can invest because the future requires us to. A lot of companies are sitting on the sidelines right now trying to make those decisions.
You have said that Europe and Asia and elsewhere are clamoring for Intel's business. And you do business all around the world. Why do business in the United States right now in this, as you call it, very uncertain environment?
Well, the U.S. is still the world's largest market for computers. China's a second, and will pass the U.S. 5-8 years out. Number one. Number two, 75% of our revenues are not from the U.S. today, but 75% of our factories, of our R&D, are in the U.S. today. So we have this large base of highly qualified, highly competent people, and of course the factory network. It makes total sense for us to be able to leverage that as much as we can going forward. Having said that, when I look at building a new factory from scratch somewhere on Earth, the incentives that other countries offer are roughly $1 billion more than you get in the United States, and on a $4 billion factory. That's a big number. And so you have to weigh the advantages of working here, the security of working here in this country, the workforce stability that you have here against that $1 billion. And some of our decisions are going to be outside the country and some will be inside.
I know you met with France's Finance Minister, Christine Lagarde, and you talked openly about the fact that their corporate tax rate is about half what it is in this country, 38% here. Is there an incentive for U.S. businesses to grow here? Because every single day we hear the administration talk about job creation in the United States. And you have said, and I'll quote, "I think this group does not understand what it takes to create jobs," speaking about Congress and the administration. They don't get it?
I don't think they do. At least they've not demonstrated it to date. And the evidence certainly doesn't show that. It needs credit. It needs small business investment. It needs stability. It needs variability being reduced. It needs to decide that the industries of the future are the ones that we want, and that we should incentivize those. And
that's exactly what we hear the president say, though.
Well, it doesn't. We still subsidize trains and agriculture. I mean, industries of the 19th century. We should decide what's important to us going forward and make sure that we've got the education system in place and the capital incentive system in place to do the investment here. It still costs a lot more to operate in the United States. Now, there's benefits for that. But as a global businessman, particularly if you're not based in the U.S., why would you come here? The most important thing we can start doing is figuring out what does it take for foreign companies to increase their investments in the United States, get the flow of capital coming back in.
What does Washington need to do? $787 billion stimulus, another $350 billion proposed by the Obama administration?
Well, I wouldn't do the second one for sure.
You wouldn't?
And half of the first one isn't spent yet. If I were king, I would consider not spending the second half of the first one.
Really? Just say forget it, it didn't work?
It doesn't seem to be working the way it is. Swimming pools in Mississippi are not going to create lasting jobs.
The president, part of that $350 billion proposal that came out last week was $200 billion in tax credits that most experts say would help big businesses. You would think Intel would like that. You don't.
The portion of it that I saw and talked about was the R&D tax credit, which has been a fixture of life in the U.S. for 20 years, but it renews itself every year. You have to go to Washington every year. Now, when you start an R&D project, you don't do R&D for a year. you need to know that this credit's going to be there. If you're going to make the incremental investment, what are the ground rules? And so giving some certainty, which and the administration I think proposed 5 or 6 year permanence, that's great. We love that. It allows us to make our decisions about investing here.
You've met with members of the Obama administration. You said more times in the last year than you met with anyone from the Bush administration over that 8-year period. What do those discussions entail? Have you made any progress? Do they seem to be open to big American businesses, or is there this anti-business sentiment that we're hearing more and more talk about?
I don't think they're anti-business. I really think they're trying. They're real people. They're Americans, just like all of us are. And I haven't seen that anti-business sentiment. I think they listen in these meetings, and then through whatever process they make their decisions. The decisions so far have not resulted in either job growth or increased confidence. And so to me that says, when what you're doing isn't working, you rethink it. And I think we need to rethink some plans.
I know you've talked about that the administration's good at listening to Silicon Valley, but not great at responding. What kind of response do you want?
Well, just some action. I mean, I think the one I talked about earlier, the R&D tax credit, the fact that our corporate taxes are twice what they are in the rest of the world. You want corporations to invest here, not to disinvest here. So the next job, the next factory, you want to do on a global basis, and it is no longer a local economy. Everyone, certainly in tech and in most large businesses, builds for a global scale. You build factories that ship products all over the world. Markets are global. So to attract a global scale set of investments, you need to have globally competitive infrastructure and tax rates.
There are those that have said, some Wall Street executives in particular that I spoke with recently, that said what the president is missing is having private sector leaders, executives, CEOs, in his inner circle when it comes to being his economic advisors. Would that help?
It can't hurt. Diversity of thought is a really important thing when you're a decision maker. And I try to surround myself with people that are unwilling to just accept things at face value and willing to challenge me. And I would hope our politicians are doing the same thing.
You're going to continue the dialogue with the administration?
Absolutely.